Okay, we should be set.
All right. Well, thank you, Summer, for helping us Zoom together. And good evening, staff and council, and anyone else who might be joining us in the YouTube world. Today is March 23rd, 2021, and we are convening now for a pre-council workshop at 6:03 p.m. And, consistent with the provisions of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, I have issued a written determination, and so we are streaming this meeting, but maybe, just maybe, it's the last one. We are together here for this pre-council workshop. On our agenda, it is item 1.1, Moab and Spanish Valley Regional Transportation Plan discussion. A couple of things. As Joe and Joette have participated as our participators, as our designated participators, I did reach out and extend the invitation for them to be with us for this workshop. But the intention of this workshop is to discuss as a council the plan, the regional transportation plan that was crafted as a result of a few meetings, and with the hope that we can put together some kind of letter of support. And so for this discussion, I would like to talk about what we support with the plan, and if there are anything, if there is any things that we would like to concern over. We could also include that in our letter to UDOT. Chuck did have some conversations about the plan. So Chuck, I may turn it over to you for just a couple minutes to maybe give us a quick download of the projects from this transportation plan that are set to really help us out, as well as some conversations you've had over the concerns that we've received. So take it away, Chuck, and welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Glad to be here. Thank you. I'd like to share my screen. And before I do, I just would say that there's no doubt that UDOT could have handled some things differently, and maybe one of them would have been to manage expectations for the stakeholder group. And that being said, though, I think that a lot of good came out of the process. And I think I'd like to review some of the projects, and I'll try to just keep it brief, but to show why these projects are in the city's interest, I believe. And of course, if they're not, if the council says, oh, we don't like that project, you're right, Mayor, we could include that in a letter saying we support these projects, but not these projects. And obviously one I know already is the bypass, and UDOT knows that the city doesn't support that either, and I won't include that. So if I can share my screen quickly, see if I can pull that up. Can you see this project list here?
Yes, we can see your screen and the project number, project location, project type.
Yeah, so what I have done is I've gone through and I highlighted, there are about 15 projects, new projects proposed as part of this. And I went through and highlighted ones where I thought there was the city's best interest, or was something that's the city in fact had initiated. And one of these is a 191 West multimodal path to connect visitors and other businesses west of the highway. And this is from south of West 200 south to Cane Creek Boulevard. So I think that expands our multimodal system through the city, and I think that's to our benefit. The State Route 128 multi-use path extension study, that ties in with the resolution that's on council for later tonight with the bike path extension. So we had put that out there as a part of this regional transportation plan that they needed to extend that. Well, now that once UDOT is done, that's on this plan that will help them support this project to obtain funding. And I believe council is probably supportive of that, just based on the resolution that's on council tonight. A separated trail system along Spanish Valley Drive, even though that's in the county, I believe, and someone could correct me, but the recent hotspot funding package that was submitted to UDOT, council supported, and that was one of the projects that was in that package. I believe that's the case. If not, we would take that one off, but I think that's true. Widen and update Cane Creek Road, including bike lanes from 500 west of the campgrounds near the Moab Rim Trailhead. Again, I think that is an active transportation component that would upgrade and make for a safer road. And part of that road is in the city. The majority of it's in the county, but part of it's in the city. So I think there's an interest in us supporting that. A frontage road system from Mill Creek Drive at Aggie Boulevard to South Spanish Valley, phase 1. There'd be an intersection project at Mill Creek and Aggie Boulevard, which we have historically asked UDOT to consider, and with the campus coming on board, it's going to become even more important, and potentially a bicycle underpass is viable there. And the new frontage roads would extend between Mill Creek Drive and Spanish Trail Road, and that's about a 2-mile stretch, and about half of a mile of that is in city limits. And the frontage roads along the west side in particular, will help eliminate congestion. So I think it's in the city's best interest to support that project. A multimodal transfer center near the airport project would connect the Moab Canyon Pathway, the 128 trail, and any shuttle or transit service in the area. I think based on, I think we support that. The Moab bypass, it's been made very clear to me that, and by tonight's resolution, the council doesn't support the bypass as presented in this plan. So I don't include that as one of the projects that's in the city's interest based on your direction. That being said, it's in there as what they call a placeholder project, and I don't know if they're going to remove it or not, but I doubt it based on conversations. The 128 corridor study and improvements, identifying potential safety improvements from 191 to Castle Valley. There are areas of rockfall along that road that need to be addressed. There's still some guardrail areas that need to be addressed. And I think because we have so many businesses that run bicycle shuttles and rafting companies that are Moab based along those roads, that it's in the city's interest to have those projects move forward. Again, competing with funds statewide. Intersection improvement that we were able to get in there, 200 North and Main. That's a problem intersection. If we had the money to do it tomorrow, I would suggest to council they consider it. We don't have the money, but it's on UDOT's list. Now this will be the second study it's on for UDOT, which makes it a stronger probability of getting funded sooner rather than later. Oops. I have to go this way. Darn newspaper format. Electronic message board system for congestion, parking, and special notices. We've talked with council before when we're talking parking structures about there's alternative ways to help manage congestion and parking. This is included in the plan. I think it's in the city's best interest to be supportive of that. And a transit and shuttle study, including intercity bus service to Wasatch and Grand Junction. I would think we'd be supportive of that based on council's interest in transit and shuttle. A pilot shuttle project, which is of course in the hotspot funding, but now UDOT staff, when it does get before the Transportation Commission, can say, by the way, it's included in the regional transportation plan, which if council decides to support components of this plan, I think would be to our benefit as the transportation board looks at those things, as well as to pursue other funding. A plan for Mill Creek Parkway continuation. That's just been discussed. No one has it even in conceptual drawings, but it's a plan to extend the parkway essentially southward. Active transportation, I think that we'd be supportive of that. And then lastly, the RV and a truck parking facility south of I-70, we've identified as part of the study some locations, and based on council's overnight parking ordinance for semis in the last 2 or 3 years where we're trying to keep semis from parking on city streets and bothering our residents, I would think that we'd be supportive of that one as well, because that provides an opportunity and a location for those long haul trucks to park that are not within city limits. So, and these are previously planned projects, so I didn't include them as.
Yeah, I think that's probably like, perfect right there. Yeah.
So I know it took longer than you probably wanted, but of the 14 projects, there's one which is that I think that the city, again, council's the decision makers, but at least 13 of those 14, I think that we have an interest in those projects being on the plan, and potentially we benefit from these projects happening someday. And I guess to wrap it up, Mary, you asked what my conversation was. I spoke with the deputy director from Region 4 and the transportation planner, and what they're asking from San Juan County, Grand County, and the city of Moab would be letters of support for the plan, so that they can take and then move it forward to get it into their funding mechanisms and programs. And I told them that I didn't think that it was, and this was just me speaking, I wasn't speaking for council. I said, I don't think council, based on what I've seen, is going to be supportive of this plan as written because of the bypass issue. I said, are you interested in a letter of support that said, we're interested in these projects, but not the bypass, including attaching the bypass resolution if it passes tonight to them? And they said, absolutely. They'd be interested in that as a letter of support that, that would help move this forward towards funding. So.
Okay, that's super helpful, Chuck. Go ahead and unshare your screen, and then I just want to open it up for discussion from council members.
I have a couple of questions for Chuck. I'm curious if you understand why they chose just that segment of Cane Creek, because from my understanding, Cane Creek Boulevard, because the between 500 West and 191 is also in need of reconstruction, as well as downstream. It was all, I think, much of that was part of a FLAP application, and so it seems like I'm just curious why we don't just identify the whole road as in need of rebuilding and multimodal improvements.
Yeah, good question. And I was disappointed the whole one didn't make it through, because we as staff had presented just what you're suggesting, which was from 191 all the way down needs improvements to it. And it didn't make it because of the way it ranked on the criteria, and I wasn't very satisfied with that, but it's the way it shook out. So that's not a good answer for you, but we did try to get it in. And if nothing else, if they were to get that section down that's on this plan, that might let us be more competitive with FLAP, because we wouldn't be competing against the county for the county section next time if we try again.
And can we say that we support it, but only as on its entire length?
We could do that, and certainly in a letter. Even if we can't see, what I'm not clear about, Caitlin, is if they're going to make one more iteration of the plan, which is entirely possible. But even if they don't, we could certainly, if council puts in a support letter, we could say, we like the project list. However, we'd like to see you delete the bypass, and we'd like to see you add in 191 widening, and then that puts us on record. Even if we don't get it into the plan itself, those letters become attached to the plans. But we could try to get them to adjust those.
Okay. The frontage road, each phase is listed as 112 million each. That struck me as high. Is that accurate, or did they miss a decimal point?
No, I think that because there has been no design done, they used lump sum costs based on previous projects. I mean, there's a lot of drainage that would be involved on the west side of the highway, issues, and then the geotechnical issues on the west side of the highway. So I think they wanted even to be conservative. Plus on the west side, we've got the hill, on the first from Mill Creek to Spanish Trails, got the vertical, whereas the rest of it's more
okay,
less flat. Yeah.
In the current UDOT long range plan, 5 laning 191 south of Moab is on there. I see that it's not in the regional transportation plan. Is that because the frontage roads would sort of provide the same functionality and this is an alternate, or?
It's included in.
Okay.
It's included. They didn't feel that they needed to call out that as a separate section because they didn't want to consume plan space.
Mhm.
But what the idea is they've already told me is they're going to prioritize the Mill Creek Drive to Spanish Trail, upgrade it all to 5 lanes. But as part of that, they would like to start that frontage road process and include that in the design.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Other council members? Well, I feel like I want to follow up with what you were saying, Chuck, just about the bypass and the overwhelming direction that we're headed. And so just to be super duper clear, we could write a letter of support, but state that we are not in support of the bypass project and attach our resolution to the letter that we send. And then that would be like completing our action
Yes.
on this item.
And UDOT,
Okay.
yes, that's what I ran by UDOT and they said they would rather have that because it allows the city an opportunity to make its position clear.
Well, Kaylin and I served on this committee. I wanted to just speak to my impression of the process because I know that others, share the same concern. What you said, Chuck, about managing expectations, I think that was a good way of putting it. In the time, in these times of COVID, it did feel quite, I did feel quite detached. And the process did feel rushed and oftentimes clunky. So I just, for myself, wanted to say that the process certainly did not meet expectations on my end. But I do recognize, I remember being in a meeting with Zachariah. It might have been 2 years ago because we were all together breathing the same air. And I do remember him saying, we are in a phased approach. And in order for us to get certain things, we need to have this plan in place. And so while I recognize the bigger process that this plan is needed, I do want to just say that as a member that participated in this, it definitely did not feel super, oh gosh, Kaylin, you're really good with words. What's the word I'm looking for? Iterative? No. Back and forth-ish? What's the word?
I don't know, engaged.
Yep, that's it. I didn't feel particularly engaged. If it's all right, I would love to hear also from Joe and Joette of comments that they have, if that would be okay with the council. Would that be okay? Okay. Which either of you would like to go first, if you'd like to speak at all? Okay, Joette first and then Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, and the council for allowing Joe and I to participate in the process. And I agree, as you all know, Joe and I wrote a letter last fall about how the process wasn't the best. And I think in the letter that I sent to you guys via email, one of the things I suggested was perhaps we ask them to allow stakeholders to evaluate the process. I think they might be interested to know where they did well and where they didn't. And I know in most consulting processes that I've worked on, that's offered. And I don't get the impression that they're going to offer that to us, but it may be something that the city may want to ask them to do so that they can get that feedback. And I know COVID was an issue, but it shouldn't have been. Every other process that I've been involved with Zoom, they figured it out. Consultants figured out how to make it work. So I think it'd be good to be able to give them some feedback, and hopefully they would want to receive that. So, and I know, Joe, you probably feel the same way. He and I have had some conversations about that. And so in terms of the plan, I sent you my notes and my comments. The two things that I really wanted to focus on, because I think Chuck did a really good job on the projects. And, I know you guys are going to have further discussion about the bypass, so I don't really want to get into that. But one of the things that I thought was that, and I don't know how you do that. I mean, if they asked for comments, one of the things that I thought that stuck out to me was the survey process was very, very limited. The questions that they asked were very vague. The responses that they got, were kind of yes and no. And I just don't think it was any benefit. And so I also think that doing a massive survey like that with the entire community, including Spanish Valley and Moab, is not really that effective, because the transportation issues in Spanish Valley are going to be much different than those in Moab. And so if there is another survey, or if they would do another survey, I would suggest that be in a larger group and have more specific questions so that you can really get good answers and the community feels like their responses are meaningful and not just yes and no. The other issue that I thought was interesting in the plan was how they developed their criteria. They had, and Chuck, you may be aware of this because you may have been a part of that, but there was positive, negative, and neutral. And it just was very vague to me how they determined what was positive and what was neutral and what was negative. And as I said in my email to you, I mean, how can you say that one thing improves quality of life, but another doesn't? And how can you say the bypass is going to improve safety, but a shuttle system isn't? I mean, I just didn't get a clear understanding of how that criteria actually was determined, because it was just very vague to me. And it seemed like it was more like subjective. It's like, well, it seems like it'd be positive. It seemed like it might be positive. It just, that is an area that I think that could be improved upon. And the other thing that was in the plan that, well, in terms of the bypass, the one thing about the bypass that I think you guys may want to clarify with them is the one sentence on page 54 where I highlighted this makes no commitment for any agency to take action on it, of the bypass, but leaves the decision to take more comprehensive analysis open as an option that UDOT leadership and or the local elected bodies can initiate. That says to me, they can do it without you. And so before they did this last draft that we got, it said and that seemed more inclusive. It's like, if they want to do it and the elected officials want to do it, we'll come together and we'll come to some solution. But with and or in there, it's basically saying either we'll decide or you'll decide. So, and or kind of gives them a little bit more authority than I would hope that the city would like. And then the last thing is at the very end, they talked about a rural planning organization. And I like that idea. I know it's cumbersome. I know the last thing we need is another committee meeting, but with the growth of our community and how transportation is going to be impacted, it's something that both the city and the county may want to consider doing so that the conversation keeps going and it just doesn't pop up and then everybody's all upset about whatever the new project is going to be, but that there's an ongoing dialogue with a committee or an organization. However, if you are going to do that, I would highly encourage a dedicated staff as they recommended, because I just don't see any of the city or the county staff be able to take on another organization or a committee process. But I think it's one that should be talked about or thought about or considered, because it's a way for us to just not have a transportation issue all of a sudden dropped in our lap. And instead, it's an ongoing conversation. So that's all the comments that I have. And I don't know if you have any questions for me. I'm happy to respond if you do.
My comment is I agree 100% with everything that is said, so I won't repeat it. The only thing I would add, though, is the last comment that Joette mentioned, I think is a high priority. As Karen knows, we served on the county transportation committee. We met every month, and we were putting in priority stages of things that needed to be accomplished. And what this plan lacks is, I realize it goes to 2050, but we have concerns today. And what I saw lacking was the ability to put a priority on things that would solve the problem as of today. But putting together a ongoing committee, I think, is a great idea. And I think the previous committee that was put together by the county, we had a huge, broad spectrum of skill sets in that committee. It wasn't just people with opinions, it was people that had skill sets. And I think the volunteers in this community would be willing to serve in that capacity. In summary, I agree with everything that was said earlier. I was just disappointed that this report does not emphasize on a priority of trying to solve some of the problem today.
Well, it is definitely set to tee up long range projects. One thing that I was curious to hear back from folks tonight is, did we miss something? Is there a project either from Chuck or from you all that have been in these smaller transportation committees, or Karen, you on the airport board, or others that are doing sitting on different committees? Are we missing any projects, any substantial transportation projects on this list, or is this pretty exhaustive? Karen?
I mean, the only thing I didn't see is rail, and I know there's been there has been support for that in the past, and especially now with the tourist train that's going to be coming from Denver. I think that shows a real viability of the possibility of using rail as a way for visitors to come to Moab, and for potentially for people from Moab to get to Denver outside of driving their vehicles. So I was just curious if that discussion came about. I didn't see it in the report.
You are absolutely correct. I do think that we discussed it as a project, but I don't remember. I mean, just so many meetings. Kaylin, can you recall?
I don't recall. I think at the second meeting, there was the opportunity to propose problem areas and solutions. And there's a lot of ideas that were put on the table, and then somehow they were winnowed between the meetings. And apparently, my understanding is that some of them would get transferred to the local area plans. But obviously, rail is more of a regional transportation planning issue. So, and I think that is a significant oversight. I think that could be a real solution for people to come here and do so in a car-free way, and would be awesome, potentially from Salt Lake as well.
Agreed. And I know that there's the section about bus. Yeah, Chuck, is that what you're thinking?
What I was thinking is, if you'd like, if they're able to make a few tweaks to this, like Joette suggested, that project 11 is not location specific, recommendation for further study, a transit shuttle study including intercity bus service to Wasatch and Grand Junction. We could ask them to expand that to bus service, rail, and other multimodal elements if that might set the stage. And I do believe that there's a rail study that's ongoing out there.
There is.
Well,
Yeah.
It's been completed. They paid $60,000, and the conclusion was it costs too much.
Yeah.
But we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater yet. And I've had a couple follow-up meetings to make sure that it's not tax dollars spent on saying, why we're saying no. One other thing that I want to make sure is in our letter that we're writing is gratitude for the projects that UDOT has funded, and the ongoing projects, like Joe was saying, ongoing projects that are either, just getting completed or, still in the pipeline to be completed. I think it's very important that our letter expresses our gratitude to UDOT for the projects that we have had. Karen?
No, I was just gonna say again, the discussions of just having those placeholders. I mean, if we're looking 50 years from now, yes, it could be very expensive. Sorry to be talking about rail again, but just having that placeholder so that it is a potential for us to come back to and show that there is that interest, and for when we do try to get federal funding or state funding, that it already exists in a plan. So
I just made a note to ask to see if we can get that added in there to that project 11, if that's acceptable to everyone.
yeah, and Chuck, I apologize. I mean, it's hard to, because I wasn't a part of the process, and I don't want to be like, well, throw this in there too. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it seems, if we are looking at a 50-year plan or 25-year plan, it would just be worth having it on there.
I don't think this rocks the boat. I think this makes the boat float better. So I think that they'd be open to that if they're going to make this adjustments. And I think
towards the end of this draft, there was discussion about shuttle and not rapid transit, but transit within the community. And during the meetings, we talked about not reinventing the wheel, but fine tuning what Springdale and Farmington are doing to get the cars off the street and keep the visitors' cars at the hotels and motels. And that was discussed, but I didn't see anything of that other than the mention of Aspen. I mean, we have solutions here in Utah that we can look at and improve on and make it work. And I think if we could include that in a response, I would be very happy.
Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to say quickly that recall that one of the things that I think was difficult was that we had the hotspot funding going on at the same time this was going on. And I know even at the hotspot public meeting, when I was talking with the public, that last outside meeting I was at, they were confused because we had two initiatives moving forward. And what I'm saying, Joe, is I'm not sure if the shuttle study that UDOT has authorized now, preparatory to the hotspot funding, will cover what you're suggesting there now. We can certainly find clarification on that. And if not, we can try and beef it up too.
Thank you.
I do believe we've had some transportation planning overlap and confusion. So hopefully our meeting tonight, we've got a couple other items on the agenda that'll move us through, and hopefully we can get out of the woods of this transportation confusion. Okay, I saw a lot of hands go up. So we're gonna go Mike and Ronnie and then Kaylin.
Yeah, I want to thank all you guys for serving. Hotspot, there was kind of a disconnect between UDOT and their goals and what the city's goals were oftentimes more quality of life oriented for ourselves. So it gets back, Kaylin, I want to thank you and Joette as well for pointing out that critical sentence about and or, which I thought was a great catch. My question for you guys is, when push comes to shove, would UDOT accept an alteration in the language? It just simply read basically saying local governments get to decide and UDOT can recommend, but it's going to be our decision. In other words, to preclude anything that the local governments don't want being rammed down our throats. better roads, more people, which we may not necessarily want. So what's your opinion on that, changing that language to take UDOT out of it?
I think what Chuck was saying is that when we talk about the language in the draft, that we are more in a position to write a letter in support, but comment on the language. I don't know that we have edit rights. Carly, can you speak to that maybe?
I think they're looking for feedback about what we support and what we don't support at this time. Whether we have edit rights is I think they're going to take our feedback and do what they want with it. Something like eliminating a whole alternative is not even necessarily in UDOT's hands. Speaking about something like a bypass, it's a huge project, a huge consideration, and they probably are feeling like it's not something that they can totally eliminate at this point. So I think that's where the tension is, where the local community is saying no, and UDOT is saying, we don't know right now.
But it's our town, kids. I mean, that's where I'm headed. Well, we could suggest, we can't directly edit it, but we could suggest suggest certain alterations need to be made, in my opinion.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's good to say. And Ronnie, you're next.
I'm afraid to say this is all just fueling all of my concerns about transparency this whole time that we've been bringing up. I mean, from the beginning, a lot of us said, well, what's going to happen with this plan? Are we as a council going to be asked to vote on it or approve it? My impression was that we were supposed to give input on the latest draft by the 4th of April. And we again and again have been told that projects wouldn't be advanced without the input of local officials and against what we in the community wanted. So what I'm hearing tonight is very different from that. And I guess I'm kind of flummoxed because I don't understand when the story changed, but that was the story we'd gotten up until this point. So that's very concerning to me. I thought they were asking for input and edits. That was my understanding as a council member. So now tonight, it sounds like we're kind of being told, this is their plan. They're going to put what they want in it. You can add a comment if you want, but it won't matter here nor there, which creates real concerns for me, because I'm also concerned about, we're asked to put citizens and ourselves sometimes on these stakeholder groups. And I don't want to waste, Joe or Joette's time or someone's. I just, someone has to say it. Sometimes it feels like people are put on these groups as political cover to make it look like you want the public's opinion, but you don't really. And that's could have fed some of the lack of interaction with stakeholders. And so for one, I'm not really comfortable writing a letter saying I support the plan, because it just seems like there are all kinds of transparency questions being raised about even including us. It just kind of seems like we're kind of dummies sitting at the table to fill a quota. But all of a sudden, all of those times we were told that our opinion mattered and the community's opinion mattered seem to have changed. So if somebody wants to clarify that for me, but it sounds very counter to that tonight.
Carly, can you respond to that?
No, I think that's a very good point. And I think this is the opportunity to let them know what our opinion is. Exactly that. To get on the record the projects we support, the ones we don't support. And I mean, I've heard that too from UDOT, saying we want a project that works for the local community. And I think they're trying to understand what the local community, how they feel. And it's part of, that is the point of this process. And what kind of commitments they are prepared to make after hearing from this council and from our community is still kind of, I would say, it's not totally clear to me. For example, something like a bypass or some sort of transportation solution in Moab, those are big infrastructure projects that go through a lot of process, like a NEPA process, where perhaps they'd have to go through all reasonable alternatives and evaluate them all. And whether or not a bypass is a reasonable alternative maybe is decided at that point and not today. So I don't know that it's UDOT being cagey. I think they're just sort of trying to manage our expectations about how these large scale transportation solutions are worked through. Does that make sense? I don't know.
I'm just going to say, I mean, every time I've been told that they will not pursue something that we've expressed opposition to. So I would be very, very troubled if something that we said we were opposed to that's on city property stayed in.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I need to say.
Caitlin?
Yeah.
Oh, so go ahead. Carly.
Well, I'll continue this discussion and then ask the original question that I had my hand up for. So there's both the regional transportation plan, and then there's Utah's rural long-range transportation plan process and documentation. My understanding is that these are separate. And it seems like the rural long-range plan has its own process and comment periods. And I'm wondering why a regional transportation plan has to be, I'm just confused about how they interrelate, and if we can express a different opinion. I've kind of gotten the impression that UDOT could end up having projects on the long range plan that aren't in the regional transportation plan, if sort of their statewide analysis indicate that it's a priority for them, even if it's not for the local community. So I'd be curious if Carly or Chuck could give us some insight if you have any.
Well, I think that's not a bad question to ask at all, Kaylin. I think the statewide plan looks at their system and focuses on their system. When they started the regional planning effort, they wanted to include, and that's local communities' input. And I guess I'd have to say that, having been in this business lots of years, asking doesn't always mean we get, and I know that, and I don't say that flippantly, but my point of looking at those 14 projects was seeing that I think we gain on like 13 of the 14, and we could make black and white clear, as clear as a resolution from council that bypass is nothing that the city supports. And they would have to understand that, but there are other local projects potentially that Region 4 can try to compete with on the statewide basis for money. And some of these projects are to the city's benefit. Again, I just want to use Aggie Boulevard as a quick one. I don't know anybody who would be against a traffic signal there. And if we could move that one up quicker, I think that's something that's in this plan that would be a good thing. But it's the statewide regional plan may do other things that this one doesn't.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks. So here's my original separate question about a project that isn't on the list, and I haven't tracked where the funding or priority for this is, but what about the south half of the loop road?
I don't remember talking about that at all, but good question.
Right, because the north half was reconstructed, but at one point, I think UDOT was willing to do it, but they wanted to make it a state highway, and there was opposition because they wanted to basically redo the alignment so that buses could and larger vehicles could use it, and then it would lose some of its current rural character.
I think in part, Kaylin, it's the loop road is considered a federal highway.
Oh.
When the north end was rebuilt, it was rebuilt under a federal highway. It was built under the federal highways, and they were the project managers and directed that entire thing. So given that we might pursue multiple funding sources, would it help our competitiveness with federal funds if it were in the regional transportation plan? That's above my pay grade. I don't know. Joette's shaking her head. Chuck might know.
It's a whole, the federal highway project is a whole different thing. It's, there's money from it's a whole, my understanding, I am not an expert in this at all, but my understanding, it's a whole different process and a whole different pot of money that's separate from UDOT.
You're absolutely right. And was it FLAP? Does anyone know that paid for that loop road? Because that's the federal land acquisition program, which we've been trying to on Cane Creek, both the city and county.
I don't
But one of the
recall
things
that it was FLAP money, Chuck.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's
I don't
federal
think-
highways.
It was
Yeah.
federal.
Yeah.
I think the U.S. Forest Service had a big impact on the redoing of the loop road.
They did
All
on,
the
they did on parts of it.
Yep.
Yeah, and to answer the question, all the Caitlin's question, all of the applications that I've ever put in on, including in my time in Moab, say, is this project on any other regional or local plan? And that helps move projects forward. The same way having projects on this plan potentially would help UDOT move some forward and us move some forward. That's my belief, Caitlin, is that it being on this plan would be a good thing if the council supported that or someone supported it. But no, I don't believe it ever came up that I remember, Mayor.
Let's do Mike and Ronnie, and I just want to point out we're 10 minutes out, so we will need to, I would like to wrap up in 5 minutes.
Feedback for you guys, the Cane Creek Road expansion out to the Moab Rim. I do know that the county's had an application from owner of 3 different parcels out there. It's a business on the, in other words, as you're driving south past Moab Rim turnoff out past Moonshine Canyon and all that. There's 3 pretty good sized parcels out there that they're looking for water for. Chuck knows about all this. And if we were to expand, widen the road out there, we just kind of invite further requests for development and so forth out there, which the town may or may not want. I personally rather like the rustic rural feel of it out there. And I'd have to think pretty hard about whether I wanted another pretty good sized subdivision in lieu of all the ag stuff that's going out there right now. So that would be one reservation I'd have about that particular part of the plan.
Okay, and Ronnie?
I was going to double check. When we say rail, are we including light rail? Only because it seems like a cool thing to include when you're considering your options for downtown. And given that Utah has some experience with that, so I would just request that that be part of the shuttle bus concept if we're going to go big. And then I did spend time reading Joette's comments, and I thought they were really good. So I was going to request that those be part of whatever submitted. But and then just finally state again, I'm definitely, without getting that, I understand it's UDOT who changed the language from, UDOT leadership and elected officials to and or. So I feel very strongly about not being able to support things if that doesn't change back. And I would like clarification about whether they're still holding to their statements. So maybe they're willing to tell us about, including us and what our community wants.
So that is the draft that is in front of us. We're going to make the comments in a that were shared tonight, and we will envelop. I don't know. My vocabulary is a little broken tonight. Not sure why. My eyes are also feeling broken, but we will bring Joette's comments into the letter for sure. Then let's just at our next meeting, Carly, maybe you might be the best staff to report out or report back to us the process of when that draft goes final, what's in that draft, and then also let's see if we're going to craft a letter for me to execute. Do we want to share it with council prior to signage? Yeah. So we can just share that, I guess, via email for review. Make sure we didn't miss anything and everything is And then again, it's going to be a letter with the, if we do in fact sign the resolution tonight on the bypass, that resolution can be attached. That would be an attachment, so. Okay. Oh,
Chuck, Carolyn,
yes.
the south part of the loop road is funded with flap money. That was my error.
Great.
All right. Get flappy. Okay. It's 6:53. Unless anyone else has some burning comments that they'd like to make regarding the regional transportation plan, I'd say let's go ahead and take a little break, and we will reconvene and go straight into citizens to be heard and the 2 public hearings. I do intend to ask for a motion to open both public hearings, and we'll bring everyone in from the waiting room, and we'll just have people state their name and why they're attending to speak, because I don't think any of us have the capacity to go through a clunky Zoom meeting tonight trying to filter out who's speaking on what. So we'll take a break, and then we will reconvene for citizens to be heard, public hearing, and our regular meeting. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.